Everyone. My name is Janita Wade, and thank you for joining us on another session of Courage in Crisis Conversations on Faith, Health, and Wellness. Today, I am joined by two of our guests. They would have Sister Andrea Errol from Antigua, who would have been part of our core team, and Reverend Adrian Smith out of Barbados, who would have appeared in a previous session conversation before. Today, we'll be talking about an interesting topic. We'll be talking about transitioning to the new normal. And all that means is we're going to be talking now more so about what it is going to look like going back to some of the things that we haven't been part of in the last few months, whether that be work, whether that be school, and even church. So that's where our conversation is going to kind of be around. I'm going to kind of keep the conversation pretty open as we discuss these different topics. I'm going to probably start with school first. Most of our territories across the Caribbean have some sort of transitioning process, either for the children doing entrance exams or those doing external examinations such as CXC and CAPE. And we kind of want to look at some of the challenges both the children and teachers may have going forward into this process. So I'm going to invite any of you to probably discuss what you've heard, what you've seen, or what you would imagine some of those challenges would be going forward for the teachers and students and even parents in this new environment.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think some of the things that would be noticeable is that, the students they're pretty social beings. They haven't seen each other for a while. And remember when we had some sessions earlier, one student said, I miss people, I miss interacting. And so one of the things is that I think initially they started with the social distancing. We have already started school back in Antigua and Barbuda for those students who are taking the CXC examinations, and they are not keeping away from each other, as they're not practicing the 6 feet. And I think it is very difficult for them to do that at times. They are accustomed to being with their friends. They haven't seen them in a long time. The wearing of the mask, I think, but it's even in the public sphere where the wearing of the mask has become it's now a chin guard in many cases. There are some parents, especially when the children have pre-existing conditions, who are pretty fearful of sending them to school. They don't want them on the buses and so forth. So there is that aspect of it where, persons, they want to be back at school, but they're also driven by the fears that they may have themselves, or even the fears that are coming from their family members. And then you have the teachers who are also, some have pre-existing conditions, who are also fearful. Some persons say it's uncomfortable to speak with the mask. If the child had any speech impediment prior to, it's really difficult for you to understand them. So it can create some frustration for some.
Yeah, pretty much what Andrea would have said are some of the things we've heard. Here in Barbados, the government has allowed for those persons preparing for 11 plus, as well as those students doing SBAs, still SBAs to be completed, as well as CAPE. So we don't have all the children being out, but again, some of the fears noted by parents in terms of, again, use of the public system. The government here has said no cafeterias will be open, so then there's an added burden now on parents to prepare lunch, or students will have to wait it out once they're at school, when they leave school to acquire something. I think from the end of teachers, there are teachers who are even more frustrated, because if not all the children are back out, those teachers who have children now raises the whole notion of who will watch the children while they are at school. who will take care of them, who are the family members, and working out that type of dynamic. So our teachers here are frustrated from that end, as well as I think, Janita, you will be aware that some of the schools had pre-existing conditions before, in terms of the physical plant, maybe in terms of management, teacher dynamic and relation. So that is still at play in some of the schools. So there are teachers who are perhaps a little bit more firm in their unwillingness to go because some of these pre-existing dynamics still have not been resolved. And it begs the question. I know here in Barbados, for instance, three primary schools that had environmental challenges, they are now meeting at secondary schools. So that's one of the ways the government has sought to mitigate that issue, but it's a very tense situation right now. I think everybody is almost on tank up eggshells. It's very tense.
Yeah, I had the interesting opportunity to already have some conversations with some teachers about their challenges. The reality is there's a lot of pressure on class 4 teachers, for instance, to get everything right. They really do push themselves. Most of them they really go beyond the call of duty. But some of their challenges, as you guys mentioned, is just navigating this new environment. One person said, thinking about going back, I think about how I'm going to keep the children in their seats for that extended period of time, keep them distanced, just stuff like that, like teaching with the mask on and just getting things oriented in that way. But I also think about the fact that there might be some advantages for many of them. There might be some things, even when you compare what would have been virtual teaching to face-to-face teaching for some of them. Can we talk a little bit about what some of those advantages might be? And we can start with you, Rev.
Some of the advantages, I think, and I was watching the broadcasts when the media was able to visit some of the schools. One of the young persons responded that they weren't learning well with the computer, and they're just glad to see the teacher because they're now able to concentrate and learn. So I think that for some persons for whom in-person contact is important, it is helpful. A couple of the schools who do those hands-on type of courses, it was important for some of the young men, again, to be out of the house being cooped up, inverted commas, but again, doing things like woodwork, metalwork, finishing some SBAs, getting to do that practical stuff where it is more their strength, feeling that sense of achievement, accomplishment, I'm able to do something. I think for some of them, getting into that rhythm and routine to do things that they love to do and causing them to find a sense of purpose, getting into that rhythm and routine towards finishing this phase of the course. So especially for the young men, I found it very interesting listening to them. They were glad. Yeah, we talk about getting out the house and so on, seeing friends and so on. But for some of them, doing those particular courses, which really help them to feel that sense of worth and value, has been important to them.
And I think in addition to that, for those persons who did not have that internet access or the environment, they were at home with several other children in the house. And so they're now in an environment where they can actually concentrate. They can participate in class because it's just their physical presence. It's not about who is using the device. If it's one device in a household with several children, my turn, your turn, and so forth, we're in class, so I can now work directly with the teacher. So I think that, and then there is that sense of, that support from your other colleagues, your other students, and so forth, and probably that encouragement and support that some students are appreciating, and it's kind of giving them that sense that I'm going back to normal. It's also an opportunity now for schools to see, because when you only have these limited number of students there and the social distancing that is required, then it's an opportunity for you to kind of have a pilot of what September will look like. And what are the other things that you need to put in place to ensure that September is not chaotic and when you're dealing with a larger number of students. So it provides that opportunity for that dry run, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I really like um, that point, because I really, in the midst of everything else, I think it's really important for us to emphasize the idea of opportunity. As much as the last few months have been very challenging for all of us, really, there have been a lot of opportunities that have arisen. And even in the education sphere, teachers have already said, there's some things technologically wise they're going to take in the classroom. There's just the opportunity to connect with certain types of children in different ways and to engage them in different ways that will be beneficial. But absolutely, like, this is going to be a joy run for persons to see what the next school year is going to look like. I do not envy at all the administrators. I mean, it's going to be a nice little headache, but you know what? I'm sure they're going to figure it out at some point. If we move on, also to work. So a lot of persons are getting back into work. I know a lot of the governments, the officers of public service in particular, a lot of them are back to work in some degree, whether limited or rotation or something. A lot of persons are back to work. And we kind of want to look at that as well, because there are some anxiety there. Sorry, there are some evidence of anxiety among some employees. There are persons that are talking about their fears and their concerns. And what else would we envision? What else could be some of the challenges going back to work? So we talk about teachers, but even extending it to other persons that may have been working from home for the last few weeks. What could be some of those challenges?
I think it goes back. One, especially if you're in a household with limited numbers and then you are expected to go back to an office with a large number of persons. And if the office space is already small, there is some anxiety. My building doesn't have a lot of space. How are they going to move us out? Because I'm not going back in there with that 7 people because there's no social distancing. So there's some anxieties with that. And, even so, you're coming to a meeting, you're coming to a Zoom meeting, and depending, depending on what your band is like, you may never show your face, so you're still wearing your nightie. It happens. Or you fix your face, you make sure you have on the right top, but that's it, because that's what's being seen. So now there's an expectation. You actually have to get up, prepare clothing, prepare yourself, take your lunch, and then in some cases when you don't have your own transport, there's that anxiety. Who is going to be sitting next to me on the bus? So even the process of getting there is way different. Everybody in the household, even if you had a family setting, everybody in the household, you get up accordingly and so forth. Now you have to get up, prepare food, prepare breakfast, maybe leave lunch and so forth. So it's like things that had become the norm, things that were the norm before is becoming the norm again. And so for some persons, it is difficult to transition back. And you would think that based on the fact that that was what you were accustomed to for the last 10 years, that it would have been just a simple transition, but it actually isn't for most persons.
Yeah, those are some really key things there that Andrea raised. I think one of the things that employees want to hear is from the employers, what are they doing? What are they putting in place? And I think some of the anxiety that employees have is that they have not yet heard from the employers what are the things that are already in place or will be in place to make it more comfortable. I'm using that word comfortable, but to show already to employees, look, as an employer, I care about you. So here are some steps we are taking. I know there are a number of employees who are concerned about central ACs and whether those have been serviced recently, how that's going to function. Again, A lot of employees are now trying to ask employers, okay, let's develop a policy governing customers. What is expected when customers come in? How, what's the procedure and those sort of things. Cleaning is one of the biggest concerns that I've heard employees talked about. How is the cleaning, the sanitizing going to be done in-house, outsourced regularly, especially for those places where persons do have customers coming in on a repeated basis. I heard recently from a few employees the frustration that they are working from home a few days and working in the office a couple of days. So the whole idea of transitioning between the two, taking home files, moving laptop, moving docking station, those type of logistics have been, it adds, we may think, well, okay, well, you only got to go work 2 days, but in the minds of some employees, if that process has not been worked up from the employer's vantage point, it becomes an added burden in terms of what you take to work, accessing some things. And then as somebody say, it's so easy to forget things at home. You could, in a rush, you're trying to deal with the children, get things set before you leave, sort things out, and you forget a file home, you forget this home. So that becomes a little added dynamic. And I just think generally infrastructural concerns and communication. And so I would encourage any employer listening, it is important to communicate. Communicate as much as possible to employees. And for employees, I would encourage any employee, have the conversation with your employer, ask those questions that are on your mind, whether it has to do with your workspace or the environment, things that you have not yet heard, because just the way you are thinking about it, your fellow colleagues may have it as a concern. And sometimes we get so worked out about something, even before we get clarity on it, we already fussing and we didn't even ask the question, so we don't even know. And it could be that the employer just hasn't communicated, but he has already, or she has already started to put that in place. So those are some of the things as well that I've been hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we could emphasize that communication thing enough. Honestly, the research on this whole COVID thing really, really emphasizes communication being a critical factor, almost to the point of annoyance. This is why governments across the world keep repeating themselves. This is why organizations keep saying the same thing over and over, because it's really important that there is no room for doubt, no room for other things. The reality is when we are stressed out, the first time we hear something, we probably don't hear it right. I know when the church stuff came into being, it was so much information. People just heard what they wanted to hear. And that's the same thing with work. People just hear sometimes you're all in your feelings and you're not always clear. So that's why just being repetitive and clear and having meetings and Zoom meetings, although some people are starting to hate Zoom now, just having those things happening over and over again is really, really important. I don't want us to take for granted, though, guys, the fact that there are a lot of persons, we live in the Caribbean. This means that for most of us, about over half of our GDP is dependent on tourism, which is for the most part non-existent. There are about 2 to 3 territories in the Caribbean that has kind of opened their international borders. Ours never closed, but no one else is open, so it doesn't really matter. But what do we say to those persons who, for them, like we're talking about work and transitioning to work, and they're thinking about transition to what work? What am I transitioning to? I don't have a job. I don't have work the same way. I don't even know if I'm going to be paid. I already am in talks. I'll tell you, my organization unfortunately has works with persons that do restructuring. And I am already in talks with a couple of organizations about them restructuring because they have no choice. There's nothing happening in their sector and they have to let go of people. And that's a difficult thing to deal with. How do we address those persons? Because we really want to also talk about opportunities and advantages. What opportunities do they have? What advantages do they have? How do they deal with this change? Is not just a temporary change and we're going back to a normal. Their normal is a completely new thing. What do we say to those people?
Really, they have to look for, what talents you have that you can otherwise utilize, what opportunities are available. Because now, based on what is happening, there are more persons who are delivering items. There are more errands, websites where you can have persons do your personal shopping and so forth. Um, with the gardening, persons are doing different things. So you really have to look at yourself and what other talents that you have. Everybody's everybody who can sew are selling. They're currently selling masks and so forth. So how can you use your talents at this point, and maybe it's an opportunity for you to also make that career change if that area that you were thinking of is an area that requires persons at this time. So it's really important for you to do a little self-assessment and then a little assessment of what is available out there so you can look at where would be a best fit. And it's also, if you have savings, you really have to look at your budgeting skills and to how best you're going to utilize those savings. There are certain things you can control, and you have to look at the things that you can, and you can work within that sphere and within that scope to see how you can best help yourself and your family. I'm not saying that it's easy, but you have to start with that introspection.
Yeah, I think Andrea has said some very key critical things. Um, I'll just add, make sure that you check all the options in terms of unemployment. We talk about NIS benefits. So ask the right questions in terms of what you may be entitled to, whether from work or whatever. There's stimulus packages that some governments have been giving out, extra unemployment benefits for certain sectors. So if you qualify, if you're a sector qualify, ask a question, do that sort of stuff. I'd encourage persons to watch the financial episodes we previously had. I thought some wonderful information was in there. But I think another opportunity presented to persons would be the whole idea of studying again, um, going back to school in some form or fashion, whether that is the formal to do associate degree, bachelor's, master's, whatever that is, or some sort of skill sets training. I know that I was reading an article recently that said anything to do with IT right now is a good area to study, because IT, as we can see, really is the domain in which a lot of things will happen. So how you could retool, be equipped in that area would also be good. I think too that if you are in the service sector, um, is it a case of transitioning from a hotel? Here in Barbados, some of the restaurants have opened. And so the whole idea of you're still in the service sector, service industry, but not with the hotel, but maybe transitioning to one of the restaurants if they're looking for persons, or as some people, as Andrea said, maybe this is the time for you to start that business that you always wanted to start. Or maybe you were doing it on the side, you were doing it on weekends. So now is the time to move it from a weekend-based business to really full-time. I know that there are a couple of institutions that are offering free advice on starting up a business now and business modeling and business planning. So I think that this would be a great time for you to get as much information and take that idea, that thought, maybe that hobby that you had, and maybe agriculture, whatever it is that you're doing, as Andrea said, whatever the skill set, and really blossoming with it. I would just say this for those persons who have not taken a vacation, and get some rest. Maybe honestly, for some persons, it's really about getting rest, clearing your mind, being able to think, to dream again. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said that this season really allowed them to look at life again, to check on their health, to take a moment. I guess their situation was different, that they were able to go and do a surgery, and so they're now resting and recovering from that. So whereas if there was no COVID, they would have had to take time off from work and that sort of stuff. Being able to do it now allows them to heal and stuff. I guess they're probably one of the fortunate ones. But again, if for you, you needed to do something, a medical procedure, and you can do it now, once you know the finances are there and you do have somebody who can take care of you, maybe now is a good time to really look at that operation, that surgery, that procedure, do some stuff medically with you, get some rest, go again, and find the opportunity to do what God can bless you in doing.
Awesome. I really it's tough, huh? I think about my clients that have expressed fear. A lot of people have spent a lot of time or has spent this time reflecting and reassessing and reconfiguring, and they've come to the conclusion, look, there's some jobs and that this job I don't want to be in, this career I don't want to be in, this company I don't want to be with anymore. You know, this person I don't want to be with anymore, that sort of thing. So it's really about just having the confidence. I know it's hard to have confidence in the midst of crisis, but having the confidence to step out by faith. Speaking of faith, we cannot no ignore or not talk about the fact that many of us in the last 2 weeks. So the thing is, this crisis is that things change so quickly. In a week or two, a lot changes, and I believe I think Barbados, we have a press conference this afternoon, so by tomorrow it'll be something else. That's the reality. So the changes are evolving, but most territories, I know Trinidad, I know Antigua, I know Barbados and St. Kitts, I think, and several of them have some version of what we would call congregational meeting again, that has been allowed with limitations, of course. What can we talk about that? What can we say about transitioning from what we were doing or have been doing over the last few months back into the sanctuary and what that looks like now for most of us? We'll start with Sister Andrea.
It's for me personally, after being at home for so long and not being in any large groups, it's something to think about, going back to church. What is church going to look like? Even the fact that for all the services I've been for the last couple of months, I didn't need to get dressed to go there. Right? I could wake up, and if I wasn't on time, and also too, it was also an opportunity because I went to Calvary several Sundays, or because if I missed Spring Gardens, or if I missed the ones that were being offered here. So it allowed you a greater variety. So now I'm going to my church because now you even think about, can I go to another church that I would normally go to with my uncle? Because would I be a part of that? What's the numbers for that church? Would I be a part of the 40? Can I just get up and do that? Or, say I get to church and I get there late and the 30 is already in. What happens to me? So there's so many considerations now. It's not just the get up and go as it was before, and then the hand washing and so forth. So it's like you said, everything that was, if church has been a constant. You went to primary school for a certain number of years, you went to secondary for a certain number of years, you've been working for a certain number of years. But for most of us, church is something that has been a constant. And if you haven't really moved from the area you were in, you were doing this church from zero to now. So it's really, it seems simple to say go back, but there's just so many considerations that that is mind-boggling.
I want to keep this conversation going because I just want to piggyback on something that you said just now. It's something as simple as getting up, rolling out, going to church, and not have to think about these things. Um, I think it might be a deterrent for some people. I see that having to think about, well, I got on a mask and then I got to get there on time. In Barbados, you got to register, you got to do your thermometer thing, and blah, blah, blah. You can't do this. It could become a deterrent. I'm thinking some people are going to opt out in the initial stages. I don't need to think. I know that's what's going to happen. But even for the mainstays and the regulars, it could be stressful just thinking about all these things. What are your thoughts, Rev?
Wow, I have a lot of thoughts.
But let me just keep them to the top five.
Wow. So if I talk to members and to pastors, do not have the expectation that a lot of persons are going to come back out in the first couple of weeks of in-person worship. So one of the things that those of us who've had conversation with colleagues have been basically saying to them, there is still a lot of uncertainty, hesitancy, fears and concerns with members. So a number of persons will not come back out. That is not an indictment on us. That's really what the culture, the environment we are in right now. I was reading an article recently that also said that some churches were experiencing declining membership before COVID. So really and truly, all COVID has done is really to magnify or fast track a decline in attendance that persons were seeing before. And that's something that as church, we will have to wrestle with, we will work through. So there's going to be that uncertainty, that hesitancy. I was talking to one of my colleagues in one of the other islands who had in-person worship, and he said, boy, Adrian, the service was sluggish. It was heavy because, again, persons came, they weren't sure, should I sing loud? Should I keep quiet? They watching, they ask somebody cough or something, you know. So some persons were there, but still not there in the mode for worship, in the mood for worship. There would have been some who went and really got the praise on from Jump Street because they're just ecstatic and happy to be glad in the house of God. But I think that you can't expect that, you know, there will be those persons who will be hesitant, a bit reserved. Here in Barbados, you know, you have to wear your mask during the service and all of that. So some persons aren't comfortable. So I think as pastors and worship leaders, persons who will be guiding the worship experience, anticipate that, expect that. And in leading, you still have to lead through that. Allow persons to connect at their pace. Allow persons to come to church in their timing, but you still have to encourage them. So one of the things I know that we're going to be doing here in the pastorate is really sending out those messages of church being a safe space. And here's what we are doing to make the space safe for you. And to communicate that repeatedly in the same way the government here in Barbados uses GIS to remind the citizens of various things. I think that churches now need to do that. It can't just be when persons get there in person. I think it has to be before. I think it has to be during the week. I think we have to use all the mediums, sending out emails to church members, putting it on our Facebook, putting it on our YouTube, all the creative ways to say to persons, we want you to come back out. We know that it will be a while, but when you do come, we have created a safe space for you to worship. But there will be those anxieties, those fears. As we transition, one of the things I think for pastors is that you can expect to see a decline in your online service in terms of the live stream. That's something that I know some people like to watch numbers or to monitor numbers. So as more churches open up, we can expect to see that because some persons may opt to go to their church in person's worship, you will have a decline in numbers. However, the trend that we have seen is that persons with social media, you can watch a service at any time you so want to. So don't just focus on the live numbers. It's always good to check like a week, 2 weeks after to see how many persons, because what you'll see is a difference, and you're able to track it too. The number of persons who watch your broadcast after it has been live. And that number also matters. But again, for those pastors who are monitoring that type of statistic, you can expect that there will be a decline. And again, I think pastors again have to wrestle or hold in tension the online service and the in-person dynamic. How do you manage that? I know some churches, as they go back to in-person, because they don't have the infrastructure physically at the church, it may mean that their online service comes to an end because they were doing it from a different location or in a different setup. I think churches are still trying to work that through. But honestly, Janita, Andrea, it's so many things we have to bear in mind now. And as you talked about it, is the effort. Do we have the drive to want to go? But I think that the longer we don't open up, the harder it's going to get. So I do think we have to turn the wheel, however slow, to get in persons back into that cycle of doing it.
Yeah, two things came to mind as both of you were talking. One of them was a word that is used in organizational dynamics, I guess, if you want to call it, is the word agile. I think our ability as a people, as an organization, as a church, as an employer, whatever, has our ability to be agile has been tested a lot. Our ability to go with the flow, not feel like a control freak, to tolerate uncertainty, because uncertainty is a part of our reality right now. And the less you're willing to tolerate uncertainty, the less resilient you will be in this environment. Is something I probably could get away to say this. I don't know if Rev could get away to say this, but I'm not a pastor, so it doesn't matter. But I'm thinking that if you are coming out to church in the next week or two, as things continue to transition, come with certainty. If you're going to come and bring that spirit of caution and suspicion, and you're not going to help. I'm sorry. I said it. Oh gosh, you're not going to help. We need the people that can fight through and push through and really come prayed up, because if you come in to spectate at this point, it's not going to work. What we need people that are going to be willing to participate in creating the atmosphere for worship. That's where it's at right now. I lead worship, and it's really hard. And I can imagine it's gonna be even harder in this environment to encourage people to worship if all you're thinking about is, oh my goodness, what's going on? Oh my gosh, that person has COVID. If that's where you're going to be, just be really honest with yourself. If you know you're going to be afraid and be anxious and worried, we're not saying something is wrong with that at all, because everyone is at a different place. Everyone is at a different spot. And I see both Andrea and Adrian want to respond, so I'm going to give them the opportunity to respond. But I also want to get them to talk about the opportunities that we have going forward, the opportunities that we have in this season, as well as any last minute or last words that they want to share with people as they continue this transition. I'm going to ask Andrea to go ahead, and then
something that you said is very important there, because for some persons, they're really anxious about going, but then I'm not being a good Christian if I don't get up and go. And the Lord has brought me this far, so I should go to church as soon as it's open. And so, but then when you get there, as Brother Adrian said, as soon as you hear somebody sneeze, you are so tense that you would have missed the entire worship and the essence of it. So we really have to make some personal decisions based on where we are. And I think that is true to everything as we're transitioning. So as we go back to work, personally, I need to go, maybe I need to get leave because of my pre-existing condition. And I am so jumpy and nervous. My blood pressure is going up. My blood sugar keeps going up. And I'm not having that control anymore. So yes, the offices are open, but maybe I am not ready for that. And so we really have to do some self-assessments, because it's not about what what is expected or what people are looking for you to do, but where you are. And so this is an opportunity for you to be honest with yourself and have that honest conversation with God. You know, I don't think I'm ready yet for here nor there. And so guide me through this process and support me while I make these decisions.
Yeah, support all that Andrea said. I think, Janita, you talked about the word agile, and there is this sphere of leadership studies now talk about agile leadership. I recently attended a seminar that talked about disruptive leadership, leading through disruptions. And I think that anybody, as we transition, prepare ourselves for more disruptions. The government here in Barbados says they issues directives every 2 weeks. So basically, from a mental standpoint, you know that in a 2 week span, things can change. It could either revert back, it could relax, or it could hold stay. And I think that you have to, as you prepare back for work, school, be agile, be adaptable, be flexible. We have to be flexible. We have to strive to be in this season. If we're not, we're going to make things worse for ourselves because things constantly change. So again, even the message to the churches is that some of these directives and restrictions are just for this season. It's not that come 2021, some of these restrictions are in place. We don't know. We don't know whether things relax. So we have to go with what the trend is, what is happening as things are unfold. And that's why as people of faith, we know that the Bible says we walk by faith and not by sight. And faith is the substance of things that are hoped for, the evidence of something that is not yet seen. So even in coming out to the sanctuary, the evidence that we are able to praise God, though we haven't seen all the restrictions lifted and things haven't returned to normal, we're going to shout, clap, dance, sing, and praise God. I've challenged persons that even if you are still at home and you're streaming the service, it is not just that you're watching a TV show, you are in worship. And so we need to be praising God even from home the way we would if we were physically in a sanctuary. So those moments that you would stand in church, I still think that you can stand and you can clap and you can dance. And that way it becomes healthier when we get back to in-person worship, that you're then able to continue that which you were doing home. But if you're just at home and you are watching the church service, laying down in bed under the covers and snuggle up, that's not a healthy posture, for ongoing worship. That's I'm watching a good movie, but remember, worship is not about watching. It is about engaging. It is about offering to God our very best, our praise, our thanks, our seeking the Lord while he may be found, our going deeper in the word of God. So I would challenge persons even from now, as we prepare for that transition, when it's time for the Bible reading, open it up on your phone. When it is time for prayer or you're going to your time of worship, tell your neighbors and friends, look, don't call me between 9, if you're watching Calvary's broadcast, 9 and 11:30, just to be safe. Don't call me between that time, because this is the time that I would normally be at church so that I can focus my thoughts. I know I have members who say to me, Rev, I get up, I bathe, I put on clothes as if I was going to church. I guess that helps with the discipline too, so that when you can transition back, it makes it easier. But I just want to encourage, my final words to everyone: transitioning isn't always easy. Each of us will have to do it at a pace that we can, and sometimes the pace that is required. So let me say that again. Sometimes we can have to transition at the pace we can manage, and sometimes we have to transition at the pace that is required. Meaning sometimes in life, it doesn't wait on you. You have to keep up with that change. But God, his grace, his love, his power is sufficient. And I believe that with the grace of God, the strength of God, you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. So be encouraged, and we are here as a Moravian church family to help you in whatever way we can.
Awesome. Great points. And I want to encourage persons now, usually sessions are quite rich. So if you have to watch this over, by all means do so. I know that sometimes I forget half of what I said and I'm in the session. So just, watch over some of the sessions that we've had. We had some really rich really quality material, even that surprise us, the presenters, when it comes out, you know. And I think that's the guidance of the Holy Spirit. I want to just leave the persons. I'd be busy saying this every time I get here, but I'm gonna say it again. Just to reaffirm what was said earlier. Rehearse. Rehearse is a big thing. Get into practice when you're transitioning. It doesn't is easier to transition if you are getting into practice. So if you haven't run in a long time, you don't just get a run a 5K. You you start small and you get into practice. So for school, for work, for church, or whatever other transitions you are doing, get in the practice. Get in the practice of wearing a mask for a long time. It might seem small, but it's a big deal. None of us really have been wearing masks for an extended period of time. Get in the practice. Get in the practice of sanitizing when you touch things, you know, get in the practice of keeping distance, and get in the practice of doing the routine things that you will need to do to transition. The other thing, though, that I really want to leave with you is I want to leave with you the idea of reaching out. In this whole thing, nothing is more important than reaching out to God and reaching out to others. It's really, really important to reach out, to look out for your fellow man, to look out for um, the people in your lives, people that might not even be in your life. Just reach out, communicate, connect, just see what else is going on around you. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own problems that we don't reach out. And the other thing is receive. Be in a posture to receive. Be in a posture to ask for help and to say to people and to be honest and say to people, look, I cannot, I cannot. Or I need some help here. I need some assistance. I need someone to talk to about this. I need some help, and be in a posture to receive. So not only reach out, be in a posture to receive. That we did this at a Zoom devotions for disciples sometime back. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them fall down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. I think in this time more than ever, we are being called to be a community, to be the church, not only for ourselves, but for others. And I pray that God will continue to encourage us as we seek to do his will. I want to really, really plug next week's session, next week's Thursday session. We are going to have an all men session. Yes, all men. There'll be no women here. Women. It's not that women can't watch, but sometimes women, let me speak to the women. The men could not listen for a little bit. Sometimes women, we need to give men opportunity to be men. And we want to give them that opportunity next week. Next week's session is called Shifting Gears, Real Talk, Real Men. So that's what's going to be going on next week. They're going to talk about their men stuff, whatever that is. And we are going to witness it if you want to witness it. But we really want to encourage, looking forward to Father's Day, which is not this Sunday, but the next Sunday. We want to encourage all the men, get the men in your life to listen out for that program next Thursday at 5 p.m. We thank you once again for sharing with us and staying with us and being with us. It's been a journey, and we are blessed to be able to present and to share with you. God bless as you continue the remainder of your week.